everyone. Welcome back to Reimagine 2021 version 9 Game of Chains. We're back with another event. I'm Roshan Mirajkar. I'm one of your hosts for this event. And this time we're really exploring layer 2 solutions, all of the innovation that's happening with side chains, and really, talking about the broader discussion of what's happening with all these different blockchains and innovators. I'm very excited to bring you a new host, a new guest on our show this time. With me here today, I have Ahmed Al-Balaghi, who is the co-founder of Biconomy. Ahmed, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you here today. And I think it would be great, just to get started for everyone to know, like, how did you get into the space? What interested you? And tell us a little bit more about what Biconomy is.
Hey, Roshan. Thanks a lot for having me on. Absolutely. So, I mean, it's funny when I got into this space, I was actually in Shanghai. In Shanghai, China, was studying Mandarin there, and I heard a bit about Bitcoin, and there was this sort of meetup going on. So I decided to go to that meetup, and it was in 2016, early 2016. And I remember the first thing I heard about sort of blockchain or crypto was where you had these two entrepreneurs talking about how you put Louis Vuitton bags on the blockchain. And I was just thinking, what the hell's going on here? And then I just remember some crazy Bitcoin maximalist that was then like, he was an ex-speaker and he was drawing charts about Bitcoin and saying, well, why it will skyrocket, and talking about sort of its fundamentals. And that's what got me initially interested in the sense where, because I have an economics background, I studied Bitcoin from an economic perspective, and I thought, like this is really interesting, and this is something that could really pave the way for the future. And I was also very lucky because I was in Shanghai. Vitalik made lots of different trips. I even attended some of the meetups where Vitalik was a speaker, and these meetups were maybe at max 20 people, right? Back in 2016, it was just super interesting. So to hear about all these concepts back in 2016, and we're seeing them sort of realized today.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting story, and it's really interesting that you have a economist background because it's a fundamental and an important layer, I would say, in our industry to understand a lot of this technology as well as the adoption element. How have things been going for you and your team in the past year? What kind of changes have you seen from the types of users who have been using your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just a quick sort of introduction to Biconomy. Really, Biconomy is a infrastructure platform, and what we really call a relayer infrastructure network that really helps developers and dApps enable things like gasless transactions, helping them to sort of allow the end users to pay gas fees using different ERC20 tokens, and also working on and really providing infrastructure around how we can enable instant cross-chain transfers between for different assets, and we call this particular product Hyphen. And so really we are a plug-and-play solution for developers to allow for these different transactional use cases. So that's a very sort of high level about who we are and what we do. And in terms of, the team and sort of like who we've been interacting with for, now and sort of the past year, it's funny. It was in last year, May, when we actually just launched our initial alpha product. And that's when we sort of, went on mainnet. And this is when we sort of just started, okay, like how can we provide very simple, developer experience for developers to implement gasless solutions in their dApps, right? And what's been interesting is sort of seeing sort of the transition between, and our focus between L1 and L2. And when I say L2, I know because there's a lot of semantics going on about what an L2 really means. I'm just talking about anything that, is on top of Ethereum and that, has scalability and throughput, right? And so, we're very close to the Polygon team, and we integrated with Polygon fairly early on because we anticipated that if gasless, if a gasless UX or a meta transaction UX makes a lot of sense. And if it were to be, something that would be the norm, then we need to ensure gas fees are super low, right? And this is where, Polygon helped to achieve that. And so we focus quite a bit on Polygon and ensuring that we are working with a lot of dApps there. And so it was funny because when we first started off, we started off with a couple of DeFi projects like Idle Finance and Curve Finance, but then the gas fees went so high. And then that's when we sort of focused a bit more on Polygon, where gas fees are lower. And now most of the projects that we work with are on these scaling solutions, so to speak. And so, yeah, it's been a very different very different in terms of the projects that we work with. And I'm just thinking right now, like last year, this time was literally just for DeFi summer. It's it's crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys are definitely focusing on very important problems, things that are preventing adoption or turning people away, which is like that first experience. So really awesome to hear. And what's your view in general? Like, do you guys work with a lot of different blockchains, or do you guys only work with a couple of different blockchains right now?
Yeah, no, I mean, for us, our thesis has always been, multi-chain is the future. And so for us, it's about how can we pick, the right chains to work with, the ones that has, a broad developer community that actually has, use cases and dApps already being deployed, and actually has, a sufficient amount of security around the network as well. And so, it's funny. I mean, we have supported, we just recently supported Binance Smart Chain, which doesn't really fulfill the third criteria, I get, the security criteria, at least from what we've seen recently. But for us, I mean, when we actually launched, we started off with Ethereum, then Polygon, and then XDAI. And we've always known that, we're going to have L2s like Arbitrum, Optimism. We're going to see, newer chains such as, Solana take off, and Tezos as well. We actually received a grant from Tezos Foundation. We've also have done a formal partnership with the Moonbeam as well, which is sort of our entry into the Polkadot ecosystem. So for us, we're very, bullish on the on basically going and making sure that we support these different chains, because it is something that we believe that, we will be seeing and living in a multi-chain future where these different chains will exist and will then have interoperability between them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's how the pace of adoption goes. A lot of people first use like one chain, get used to it, and now people are actually building applications and finding that everything can't just stay on one chain. Like there's tons of adoption and institution coming into the space. Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about, you worked with Arbitrum, I believe, last month to achieve this gasless or feeless transactions. So what impact do you think that will have on increasing adoption, or even the types of things, applications that people will build that are tough right now?
Yeah, I mean, so for some of the applications that, for example, that we worked on, we've worked with that are deployed on Polygon, for example, lots of their growth and lots of, where they've seen actual sort of user retention and lots of great feedback is from the fact that their end users say they don't need to pay gas, and that the UX is very frictionless. And I think in this industry, we understate how much, when you remove friction, it expands markets. And so we believe the same thing, will happen, and even at a larger scale potentially on Arbitrum, given the amount of, new developers that are now going into the ecosystem and the amount of dApps that that they're bringing on board. And I really do believe that, it will become standard because of the fact that people will come to expect, things can be done in a gasless way. And especially if you're going to reach the 99% of the world, that's what, in a way, people expect. Or And even if it's, not done in a way where end users don't need to pay the gas fees, it could be done in a way where, they could pay these fees in a different way, whether it's through a monthly subscription, whether it's through paying the gas fees in a different token, whether, you have advertisers paying the gas fees, right? It doesn't always have to be the project itself. And so I really believe we're going to see sort of different models of this into the future, and working with Arbitrum has sort of helped us, at least realize a few of the things that we want to do in the space.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. We have like this user-centric model right now where like users are paying all the fees directly themselves. And that is the theme of Web 3.0 as well. But what are the biggest shifts you think from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0 in terms of infrastructure? Like, do you think a lot of these companies are going to run their own nodes, or do you think they can use something like Biconomy to maybe subsidize some of those fees and not do it themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we're going to see a rise in, and we're seeing this now. I mean, where you have all these dApps and projects relying on whether centralized third-party services or decentralized infrastructure, right? And so we're seeing this sort of across the board. I mean, the whole industry right now, kind of operates on Infura or or Pocket, or these different, let's say, node level plays, right? Many are okay with paying a SaaS fee, or paying on a per API fee, or being too technical to actually come in and look into the decentralized options and way of doing things, right? And we're also going to see decentralized web hosting very soon, and of course we're seeing decentralized storage on the rise. And so these will either be packaged up as as a core component where developers will pay these as a monthly fee, or they'll pay them on a per usage level. And given the services that sort of we provide as Biconomy, and especially with our plans to progressively decentralize in the future, that would be something that developers would come in and will either pay a monthly fee or a per usage fee, right? And again, depending on the product, depending on the service and the use case, we will, we'll see, sort of the actual person or the entity who will be paying these things could either be the direct end user or be the projects themselves, right? Well, the whole point is, or a different third party. Well, the whole point is that how can you do it in such a way that it's seamless for everyone and it makes sense for each particular use case that we're working on as well.
Yeah, for sure. It has to be sustainable and it has to make sense. And, kind of while we're on the topic of developers, because you guys focus so much on developers and, making it very easy, making their experience easy, and, at the end, making it easy for end users as well. Like, what are some of your metrics that are important when you're developing tools for developers? Like, I don't think a lot of people know or talk about what developers care about.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because we've always received feedback on our documentation, for example. Like it's not a metric per se, this is very subjective, but really good documentation is something that is hard to come by, especially in the crypto space, right? And so in traditional Web 2 world, this is sort of a given. And so we definitely need to do a better job just as an industry, and even the different blockchains that are coming out to provide sufficient documentation for both existing developers in the space and sort of new ones. And so for us, we try and do as much as we can on that front. And also, and another point is making sure that we're able to actually support different languages that we anticipate developers would be using when using Biconomy. And so this is important, especially when it comes to sort of thinking about which libraries to put out and to support. And for us, we just feel that we just have that extra sort of drive to basically say, okay, how can we make this easier for the developer later on, right? And another thing, is of course the data and analytics as well, to provide all, the key metrics that they need to sort of to see like how, how many transactions that they're doing, what are, how much sort of gas costs is this costing them, for example, where are the stuck transactions or failed transactions, how many of all those transactions were successful as well. All of these things are sort of like super important. And again, I'm not saying, no one in this industry has figured out, or has the whole solution ready, fit prime for developers, right? It takes time to build really good infrastructure, because a lot of it is not just smart contracts work, right? A lot of it is back end, and so it does require, quite some DevOps work as well. So yeah, I definitely think as the industry is maturing, we'll definitely be seeing, way better, like developers will have just way better toolkits in a couple of years from now, and especially, running on any EVM chain, a lot of the tools are already there, which is great.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I'm glad you covered some of those, because for the native blockchain developers, they don't really feel a lot of those same pain points. But in order to get, traditional developers into our industry, you're totally right that, by you all providing them, more data, they're also getting educated about things that they should even be wary of, that you don't really learn, in school, and even in the real world so far with developing with open source technology. But before we talk about a lot of the applications that you all are supporting, tell us a little bit about the Biconomy relayer network and how that works from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for us, especially in terms of like how we think about meta transactions and how, we want to provide this ability, this ability for developers to easily, pay the gas fees on behalf of their end users. We saw that, lots of different companies in the space, were building out infrastructure on their own. And this will comprise of sort of, relay network in order to do this particular feature on the DApp. And so for us, we, it was just pretty plain simple that, hey, like, how about we build a very professional, robust relay network for these developers to easily plug and play into. And really just in sort of a high level way, I mean, how it really works is very simple in the sense where our relays are, they are essentially sort of the sender of the transaction. They have either ETH or Matic tokens, depending on the network that the transaction is sent on, already stocked up. The developers, the end user that is basically doing a transaction on a Biconomy enabled dApp, all they have to do would basically is sign a message, and that message would then be collected by the relayer, and they'll also collect, and the relayer also collect sort of transaction parameters of that particular transaction, and then they would send, and the relayers would basically send that transaction on chain. And so in this way, you basically have the end user, just all they have to do is sign a message, but everything in the back end, on the background in this instance, is basically facilitated by us.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. It's like a much better experience for users, I think, because that's all they want to do, right? They want to sign transactions, keep using the applications that they want to use. But from your view, do you think that going forward in the future, we'll have one chain or a couple of chains that are seen as a settlement layer, and then the rest of them are used for like transaction finality? Or do you think that a lot of these layer 2 technologies are enough? Like, you don't need high levels of security if you're doing something simple like buying a cup of coffee or something like that?
That is a good question, and it also, I mean, it's we could definitely paint a picture of a ideal world we'd like to see, I think. But really what happens in practice is, if you have a chain that actually has real business activity, that has real users and a real community, that will blow off no matter what, no matter the tech, right? Of course, if it's very insecure and it, we see issues like BSC has had, then not many people will trust that particular chain, right? And this is why I'd say I'm more bullish on community, more bullish on chains or teams that actually can drive dApps to their platform, that drives real users, right? And then eventually that would sort of pave the way into how we would basically see, how many chains will be operating, right? So Ethereum has already sort of secured that spot in terms of being both a transaction and a settlement there, right? But it could really go in any way whereby, if Polygon and Arbitrum, for example, gets all the market share because they're the ones who are doing better DD, for example, right? Then that sort of might be the case in terms of, okay, we might just have a couple of L2s, and then we'll probably see the different communities that are surrounding other chains like Terra or Solana, and they will have their own ecosystem as well, and eventually these will be interacting with each other. So I definitely would say that both the developers as well as the end users, how they really form around a particular chain and to help bolster that up would be something to always look out for. Because from the tech perspective, everything theoretically should be like X, but we haven't seen anything like that yet, right? But we could, but it's just so that I love history because history, it doesn't repeat, but always rhymes, right? And it always showcases that, it's not necessarily the best tech that always wins. It's more so, there are so many other factors at play that would really help, let's say a new chain to come out on top. But of course, right, we don't want any sort of centralized or insecure or, easily tampered, L2s or L1s to come into the market, because they do this huge trade-off between, UX and security, right? There should be a balance. But right now we're seeing like, there's this sort of tip in a way where these systems they're just not usable because there's so much focus on other things. But then how do you strike that balance, right? For broader adoption and security.
Yeah, a lot of great points in there. I'm going to go back and listen to what you just said, because I think you're completely right. And I think what you were trying to tell me too is like, yeah, some chains have figured some things out, but like the war is not over, so to speak. And I think like competition is not always bad in our space. That's how we're able to make all these innovative advances, right? But kind of going into a lot of the things that you all support in terms of applications and technologies that you help support that people use. How do you all support DeFi? Like, what are some interesting applications that Biconomy is involved with?
Yeah, so we basically have been working with a couple of applications. For example, if you were to check out Hyphen, which is on Polygon, they're like sort of this gasless Uniswap on Polygon, and it's great that they've just recently enabled a toggle on and off for gasless experience, and that's using Biconomy in the background. And that's great because of course there'll be some power users who care about the gas they're paying, for example, right? But again, broader adoption means 99% of the world who probably wouldn't care about that, and they just want their transaction to go through. And so Hyphen has been one. Another one has been Perpetual Protocol, which is now running on XDAI, and they are using us again, for facilitating trades. in a gasless way for their end users. Yeah, and we've been working with Curve before, and Curve have just recently implemented EIP 2771 as well, which is one way to integrate Biconomy to implement meta transactions, and that's something that we're hoping to do very soon with the Curve team. And yeah, I'd say these have been the main ones. We have a few more projects that we're working with closely as well. Both on the newer chains that we're supporting, but also sort of new projects that are coming onto Polygon as well.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting to hear that, like, we're talking about like a gasless Uniswap. I think a lot of our audience that is listening to this right now is, and maybe they've never heard of things like Polygon because it's still pretty new. They're definitely going to want to check it out. So what do you like? When do you think this transition will happen of people kind of leaving the chains that they're comfortable with, the experience they're comfortable with, and then trying out other chains that offer like a better experience, or I should say like more realistic experiences in these applications? Like, what will it take in your view?
So I mean, I think it all goes back to the end user and how much, how technical they want to sort of be when it comes to exploring these dApps, right? Do they want to go through the whole MetaMask setup? Will they will they basically go and use a different wallet, for example? And there are a variety of wallets out there that could achieve the same thing. And because a lot of these really dictate how the end user will also interact, with these chains, because what we're lucky with, especially when it comes to EVM, EVM chain, if we have, let's say, a MetaMask, you've got one address, you could easily switch between the different chains, that supports that is basically that you could see via your MetaMask wallet, right? So like with Biconomy, for example, we've enabled this sort of network agnostic transaction layer, whereby if you're on XDAI or Polygon, you don't need to switch your RPC. You don't need to do all of that if you want to basically use the dApp on this specific sidechain or L2, right? You would do it. You would basically have that Ethereum address, and you basically be signing this transaction from L1, but it would be executed in L2, right? And so I think that what's going to happen is that users will just interface with the dApp, and at the end of the day, things will just settle in the back end without them knowing how things are being settled, right? I don't see end users in the future saying, "Oh, I want to use Ethereum today, or I want to use Polygon today, or I want to." It's going to be tough, because then you just have all these different wallets people holding for like different chains. And also it depends, like, whether you're an EVM maximalist. If you think EVMs will win and that's the way, then yeah, maybe we could have this sort of future where you have this one wallet, and it's an Ethereum wallet, but you could easily interact with any EVM chain via that Ethereum RPC, right? And yeah, it's a tough question, because each new ecosystem, and now I'm talking about L1s, would require its own its own standards, their own wallet standards as well, and seeing how these will affect end user behavior. At least what we're seeing now is that it's tough even for crypto native people going between all these ecosystems. It's an actual job. Right? And so it's definitely not something that is, that in like, your normal average Joes will want to understand. And so these things will have to be abstracted away, a lot before we can get to sort of this desired state that we all want to get to.
No, 100%. Those are great points. I think you answered it in a very balanced way. Like you're gonna have like crypto native people that will care to the very bone about where that transaction is being settled, and then you're gonna have the rest of the world, so to speak, that it just wants to use this technology, right? They just want a better yield, or for artists, they want to make more money. And sort of to wrap things up, tell us a little bit about how your team has helped NFTs improve, I believe, on Polygon, and also, yeah, just tell us like how we can keep in touch with you and your project.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one thing before I get into that is one thing as well about especially when it comes to sort of, for example, like DeFi, just looking at sort of verticals, we'll definitely be seeing let's say centralized plays tapping into these decentralized liquidity protocols, right? So you'll have these companies, they will be the ones who care about where yield is coming from and which chain it's coming from, right? But the end users, all they see is a number and a percentage, and that's it, right? And I think that is like one concrete example that we will probably be seeing for sure. And I think we're seeing this already with some centralized places like BlockFi and Celsius, where they're definitely tapping into into some of these decentralized protocols. And when it comes to sort of NFTs, we've been one thing that we've looked at is like, why, if you're an artist and you're on these platforms, why should it create, why should you basically be paying either $50, right, which is on Ethereum, to sort of mint an NFT, or pay fraction of a penny to mint an NFT, right? It just, from a UX side, both extremes just doesn't make sense, right? Why do you need 0.00003 Matic, right, to mint an NFT? And so the gasless use case here makes so much sense, because we've had we're working with a Polygon NFT minter, whereby anyone could really just go and mint their own NFTs, and these are being those transactions, those minting transactions, are being relayed by Biconomy. And we've been working with other projects such as Ethermon. We've been working with Decentraland as well. We've been working with Zrun. Zrun has been like, it's taken off so much in terms of how much activity they've had, and also Artvatars as well. We've recently integrated with a new project as well, which is a museum of crypto. They've been around for some time, but now they're also sort of ensuring that they have sort of NFTs that can be minted and sort of be sold as well. And so we're working with quite a few projects on that front. So yeah, we're just super excited about all this sort of activity that we're seeing.
Yeah, those are all like great points to end things off. And yeah, really glad like the ethos you and your team have about the way you guys are rolling out specific updates, and really talking about the experience, like kind of even before the technology, because you're definitely right. Technology is like rampant everywhere, but the experience of your first impression is super important. Yeah, and lastly, how can people get in touch with you and get involved, with your project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we're pretty big on Twitter. We tweet as much as we can, whether it's from the Biconomy tag or from my tag. So I mean, at Biconomy, we're literally at Biconomy on Twitter, and you could find us on Discord very easily as well. But alternatively, you could also sort of just at me, my name on Twitter. I'm at Balaghi, which is my surname. So you could check me out there. I'm also active on Discord as well, if people could find me through the Biconomy Discord channel. So yeah, so that's how you can get in touch with us.
Awesome. Ahmed, thank you so much for being here today on the Reimagine 2021 show. I think we talked a lot about a lot of the interesting problems that are facing our industry. And yeah, I wish you all best of luck, and thanks for all of your work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot for having me on.
For sure. And I'm your host, Roshan Mirajkar, and I'll let you all tune back in to the rest of Reimagine 2021 version 9. Thank you.